The mahogany conference table gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Jason Reed reviewed the most important contract of his 28-year life. Reed Technologies' Manhattan headquarters buzzed with anticipation. This deal with the Khalid Investment Group could transform his artificial intelligence startup into a global powerhouse worth $12 billion. The Arab investors are offering unprecedented terms, announced his business partner, Daniel Chen, sliding documents across polished wood. Full funding for our military AI contracts, plus international expansion rights. It's everything we've dreamed of. Jason studied the Arabic and English text, his steel-gray eyes scanning numbers that represented 5 years of 18-hour days and sleepless nights. At 28, he'd already revolutionized predictive AI technology, but this partnership would make him one of the youngest tech billionaires in America. Sheikh Faisal Khalid specifically requested today's signing, Daniel continued. His plane leaves for Dubai tonight, so we need final approval within the hour. Jason nodded absently, touching the vintage Rolex on his wrist. The watch had been his father's final gift before cancer claimed him 7 years ago. William Reed had been a brilliant military engineer with an unfulfilled vision. On his deathbed, Jason had made a solemn promise. I'll build this company into a legacy you would be proud of. That promise had fueled countless nights of coding and development, transforming his father's preliminary research into cutting-edge artificial intelligence that could save American soldiers' lives. Now, with Khalid's backing, Reed Technologies could deploy globally. The conference room door opened quietly and Isabel Vega entered with practiced invisibility. She perfected the art of being unnoticed during her 8 months serving Reed Technologies executive meetings, moving like a shadow in her black server's uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back professionally, and she kept her eyes downcast as she arranged the afternoon refreshments. Jason barely glanced up from the contract. Coffee, Isabel, and make sure those pastries are fresh. We're hosting some very important people today. Isabel's movements faltered slightly as she caught sight of the contract's header. Her fluency in Arabic, gained from years working in international finance, allowed her to read the document title that made her blood run cold. She continued arranging items with steady hands, but her mind raced. Of course, Mr. Reed, she replied softly, her voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent that most people assumed was Mexican, rather than the result of her multilingual education. As she poured coffee, Isabel positioned herself to overhear Daniel's phone conversation with their legal team. Her ability to understand Mandarin Arabic, French, German, Spanish, and English had proven invaluable in her previous career, and now it might save Jason from making the biggest mistake of his life. The contracts look standard, Daniel was saying in Mandarin to their Chinese-American lawyer, assuming privacy. But I want you to review paragraph 12.3 once more. Something about the subsidiary clauses feels off. Isabel's heart stopped. Paragraph 12.3 was exactly what she'd been worried about when she saw the Arabic header. She'd seen identical language destroy other American companies. Careful with that coffee, Jason said sharply as Isabel's hand trembled slightly. These documents are irreplaceable. Isabel steadied herself, meeting his gaze directly for the first time in months. My apologies, Mr. Reed. The contracts appear quite complex. Why? Something in her tone made Jason pause. Isabel had served hundreds of meetings, always silent and efficient. Why was she making conversation now? They're fairly straightforward, Jason replied, studying her face. Standard international investment agreements. Isabel finished pouring coffee, her mind working frantically. She needed to warn him. But how could a simple server possibly know enough about international law to identify contract fraud? Will the Arab investors be joining you soon? She asked carefully. Daniel checked his watch. Sheikh Khalid's team should arrive any moment. This is the biggest deal in Reed Technologies' history. Isabel nodded, moving to arrange documents on the side table. As she organized papers, she deliberately positioned herself near Daniel's phone when it rang again. Wade, Daniel answered in Mandarin, then switched to Arabic when he recognized the caller. Naam Sheikh Faisal. Isabel continued her tasks while listening intently. Sheikh Faisal was explaining something about American technology transfer protocols and ensuring complete subsidiary control. Her blood turned to ice as she understood the true meaning behind the corporate jargon. Is there anything else? She asked Jason, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Jason was absorbed in reviewing figures with Daniel. Just keep the coffee fresh. This meeting could run for hours. As Isabel moved toward the door, Daniel's phone conversation shifted to French, discussing les lois de transfert technologique with someone who was clearly coordinating the legal aspects of the deal. The pieces clicked together in her mind with terrifying clarity. She had to act now. Returning to the conference room, Isabel deliberately knocked over a sugar bowl, sending packets scattering across the table. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, kneeling to collect them. "Isabel, what are you doing?" Jason's voice carried surprise rather than anger. As she gathered the sugar packets, Isabel whispered, "Mr. Reed, perhaps you should have your legal team pay special attention to the subsidiary transfer clauses in paragraph 12.3. The room fell silent. Daniel's eyebrows shot up and Jason turned to stare at her with surprise. "Excuse me?" Jason's voice carried curiosity rather than anger. "What do you know about contract law?" Isabel's heart hammered against her ribs. "I simply noticed that the Arabic text in that section doesn't exactly match the English translation. Small discrepancies can sometimes be significant." The audacity of it hung in the air. Jason rose from his chair as all 6 feet of him, radiating the confident authority that had built his company. "You read Arabic?" Among other languages, Isabel admitted, her facade of simple efficiency cracking slightly. "I couldn't help but notice some concerning terminology while serving your previous meetings." Jason felt the world shift slightly. The quiet server, who'd been invisible for months, had just revealed linguistic skills that could impact a $12 billion deal. "What kind of concerning terminology?" he asked, his business instincts suddenly sharp and focused. Isabel glanced at Daniel, who was watching her with undisguised suspicion, then back at Jason. "The kind that suggests your technology patents would be transferred to Middle Eastern subsidiaries under creative interpretations of international law." Daniel's phone buzzed with an urgent text. He glanced at it and paled. "Jason Sheikh Faisal is in the lobby with his legal team. They're ready to finalize everything now." Jason looked between the contract, Daniel's worried expression, and Isabel's composed face. "Daniel, give us 5 minutes." "But Jason, they're expecting—" "5 minutes, Daniel." After Daniel reluctantly left, Jason circled the table to face Isabel directly. "Tell me exactly what you think you discovered." Isabel took a deep breath, knowing her next words would either save his company or destroy her carefully constructed new life. Paragraph 12.3 allows Khalid Investment Group to transfer your AI patents to subsidiary companies in countries that don't recognize American intellectual property protections. Once transferred, they can manufacture and sell your technology without paying you another cent. Jason felt cold dread creeping up his spine. "And you know this, how?" "Because I've seen this exact contract language before," Isabel said quietly. "It was used to destroy 3 American tech companies in the past 2 years. The victims thought they were getting investment partners. Instead, they got robbed legally." "Who are you?" Jason demanded, studying her with new intensity. Isabel met his gaze steadily. "Someone who knows that in about 10 minutes, Sheikh Faisal Khalid is going to offer you everything you've ever wanted, and I might be the only person in this building who understands what he's really taking in return." Jason stared at Isabel, his analytical mind racing through possibilities. "You're telling me that the most prestigious investment group in the Middle East is planning to steal my company?" "I'm telling you to read paragraph 12.3 very carefully," Isabel replied, moving to the contract and pointing to specific lines. "This clause here in Arabic translates to irrevocable technology transfer upon subsidiary activation, but the English version says collaborative technology sharing for mutual benefit." Jason leaned over the document, acutely aware of Isabel's proximity and the subtle scent of her perfume. "The English sounds harmless." "That's the point. In international law, Arabic takes precedence in Middle Eastern courts when there's a translation dispute. If they activate subsidiaries in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, your patents transfer immediately and permanently." The implications hit Jason like a physical blow. "They're using semantic manipulation to commit legal theft." "Exactly. And once they have your military AI technology, they can sell it to hostile governments while you face prosecution for technology leaks you never authorized." Jason straightened, studying Isabel with growing amazement. The shy server had vanished, replaced by someone who clearly understood complex international law. "How do you know so much about corporate espionage?" Isabel hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. I used to work in international mergers and acquisitions before circumstances forced me to start over. What kind of circumstances? The kind that involved discovering your own firm was facilitating exactly these types of fraudulent deals. Jason felt pieces clicking together. You were a lawyer, corporate attorney specializing in international technology transfers. I also have an MBA in global finance and speak 6 languages fluently. Isabel's professional mask slipped slightly. I was very good at my job until I realized what my job actually was. The conference room door opened and Daniel returned looking frazzled. Jason Sheikh Faisal is getting impatient. His legal team wants to begin the signing ceremony immediately. Jason glanced at Isabel, then back at Daniel. Tell them we need 30 more minutes for final review. 30 minutes? Daniel's voice pitched higher. They've been planning this for months. If we delay now, then they'll wait, Jason said firmly, or they'll leave. Either way, we're not signing anything until our legal team reviews every translation. Daniel shot Isabel a suspicious look. Jason, what's going on? You were ready to sign an hour ago. An hour ago, I didn't know there were translation discrepancies in the contract. Translation discrepancies, the Khalid Group provided certified translations. Their reputation is impeccable. Isabel stepped forward slightly. Mr. Chen, have you personally verified the Arabic translations, or are you relying on their certified versions? Daniel's face flushed with irritation. I don't speak Arabic. That's why we use certified translators. Who provided the certified translators? Isabel asked quietly. The Khalid Group, naturally. They have their own legal team for... Daniel stopped mid-sentence as the implications dawned on him. Jason felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. They provided their own translators for a contract that benefits them. That's standard practice in international deals, Daniel said weakly. Isabel's expression remained neutral, but Jason caught the flicker of sympathy in her eyes. It's standard when all parties trust each other completely. Less standard when billions of dollars are at stake. Jason's phone buzzed with an urgent call from his head of legal. He answered quickly, speaking in rapid English, while Isabel listened with obvious understanding. Sarah, I need you to bring an independent Arabic translator to the office immediately. Yes, I know Sheikh Faisal is waiting. No, we're not signing anything until every word is verified by our own people. He hung up and found Isabel watching him with something that looked like approval. You're taking a significant risk, she said. If Khalid Group is legitimate, they'll be insulted by your lack of trust. And if they're not legitimate, then you just saved my company and possibly my life. Daniel ran his hands through his hair nervously. Jason, this is insane. The Khalid Group has invested in dozens of American companies successfully. Why would they suddenly start committing fraud? Jason and Isabel exchanged glances. Daniel, Jason said carefully, which companies has Khalid invested in recently? TechFlow Solutions, Quantum Dynamics, and Advanced AI Systems. Daniel rattled off proudly. All successful partnerships. Isabel's face went pale. Mr. Chen, you might want to check the current status of those companies. What do you mean? I mean, call their CEOs and ask how their partnerships are working out. Daniel's confident expression wavered. He pulled out his phone and dialed TechFlow's main number. After several minutes of transfers and holds, his face went white. TechFlow Solutions filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago, he whispered. Their CEO says Khalid activated subsidiary clauses and transferred all their patents to Qatar-based companies. The silence in the room was deafening. Jason felt a mixture of rage and gratitude as he realized how close he'd come to destroying everything he'd built. Isabel, he said quietly, you just saved my company. Not yet, she replied. Sheikh Faisal's team is still here, and they're not going to leave quietly when they realize their plan failed. Men who orchestrate $12 billion frauds don't typically accept defeat gracefully. Jason moved closer to her, drawn by her intelligence and the undeniable chemistry sparking between them. What do you suggest? Isabel's eyes met his, and he saw calculation mixed with something warmer. We need to document everything and contact the FBI before they can destroy evidence. But first you need to decide if you trust me enough to let me help you catch them. Why would you want to help me? Isabel's professional composure cracked slightly, revealing vulnerability underneath. Because watching you work these past months, I've seen that you're one of the few CEOs who actually cares about your employees in your country. You don't deserve to be destroyed by people like Sheikh Faisal. Jason stared at her, seeing her clearly for the first time. The simple uniform couldn't hide her intelligence or the elegant strength in her bearing. Who are you really, Isabel? Before she could answer, the conference room door burst open. Sheikh Faisal Khalid entered with three men in expensive suits, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Mr. Reed, I hope you are ready to make history. My legal team is eager to finalize our partnership. Jason felt Isabel tense beside him. The game was about to begin, and everything depended on how well they could play it. Sheikh Faisal Khalid commanded attention the moment he entered the room. Tall and distinguished with silver threading through his black hair, he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to closing billion-dollar deals. His entourage included two lawyers and a man who was clearly security, though he wore the same expensive suit as the others. Sheikh Faisal. Jason stepped forward, extending his hand, while acutely aware of Isabel's presence behind him. Thank you for your patience with our final review process. Of course, Faisal replied, his handshake firm and his English accent impeccable. Due diligence is the mark of a careful businessman. I trust everything meets your satisfaction. Jason glanced meaningfully at Isabel, who had seamlessly returned to her role as invisible staff arranging papers at the side table. Actually, we've discovered some questions about the translation accuracy in certain clauses. Faisal's smile remained fixed, but Jason caught the micro-expression of irritation that flashed across his face. Translation questions, I assure you, our legal team employs only the most qualified certified translators. I'm sure they do, Jason replied smoothly. However, our legal counsel insists on independent verification for all foreign language contracts. Company policy. Isabel moved closer to the refreshment table, positioning herself where she could overhear while appearing to focus on her duties. Her heart raced as she recognized the subtle shift in Faisal's demeanor. The predator, realizing his prey might not be as helpless as expected. Perhaps we could address specific concerns, suggested Dr. Khalil Mansour, Faisal's lead lawyer. I personally oversaw every translation to ensure absolute accuracy. Daniel, still shaken by his conversation with TechFlow Solutions, spoke up nervously. We are particularly interested in paragraph 12.3 regarding subsidiary technology transfers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Isabel watched Faisal's reflection in the polished conference table surface, noting how his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ah, yes, Faisal said carefully. The collaborative technology sharing provisions. Quite standard for international partnerships of this scope. Isabel's phone set to silent mode buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it discreetly and felt her blood run cold. The message was in Arabic. The woman is listening. Eliminate the problem. Moving with practiced stealth, Isabel slipped the phone back into her pocket and continued arranging documents. But her mind raced. Jason, meanwhile, was studying the contract with new eyes. Sheikh Faisal, this clause about irrevocable technology transfer upon subsidiary activation. Could you explain how that differs from the English version about collaborative sharing? The silence stretched for several heartbeats too long. Faisal's lawyers exchanged glances that Isabel recognized as silent communication between conspirators. I believe there may be some confusion about technical legal terminology, Dr. Mansour said smoothly. Perhaps if we reviewed the documents together. That won't be necessary, Jason interrupted. Our independent translator should arrive within the hour. We can clarify everything then. Faisal's mask of polite patience began to slip. Mr. Reed, surely you understand that my schedule is quite demanding. Delaying this signing could complicate our timeline significantly. Isabel felt the walls closing in. Faisal's security man had positioned himself near the door, and she noticed him speaking quietly into a nearly invisible earpiece. Whatever was happening, it was escalating beyond contract negotiations. Jason, Daniel whispered urgently, maybe we should consider. The conference room phone rang, interrupting Daniel mid-sentence. Jason answered with a sharp "Reed." Isabel couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Jason's face go pale as he listened. After a moment, he hung up and looked directly at Faisal. That was the FBI, Jason said quietly. They're investigating reports of corporate espionage involving technology transfers to Middle Eastern subsidiaries. Apparently, several American companies have filed complaints about fraudulent investment schemes. The mask finally dropped from Faisal's face completely. Mr. Reed, I hope you're not suggesting— I'm not suggesting anything, Jason replied. I'm simply informing you that federal agents will be here within 30 minutes to examine all contracts and documentation related to our potential partnership. Isabel saw Faisal's security man touch his earpiece again and speak in rapid Arabic. Execute contingency plan 3. Eliminate all witnesses. Her blood turned to ice. These weren't just white-collar criminals. They were prepared to use violence to protect their operation. Moving with careful precision, Isabel approached Jason under the pretense of refilling his coffee. As she leaned close to pour, she whispered in barely audible Spanish, Están armados, planean matarnos. They're armed. They plan to kill us. Jason's hand stilled on his coffee cup, but he gave no other sign he had heard her warning. Instead, he looked up at Faisal with a businessman's smile. While we wait for the federal agents, perhaps we could discuss your other successful American partnerships. Faisal's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Well, Daniel mentioned TechFlow Solutions, quantum dynamics, and advanced AI systems. I'd love to hear about their experiences with the Khalid Group. Isabel continued serving coffee while watching the security man's hand drift toward his jacket. She needed to warn Jason more explicitly, but with Faisal's team monitoring every movement, one wrong word could trigger violence immediately. Instead, she deliberately knocked over the sugar bowl again, sending packets scattering across the conference table and onto the floor. As everyone's attention focused on the clumsy accident, she caught Jason's eye and mouthed silently, "Gun." Jason's training in crisis management kicked in. Without changing his expression, he pressed the building's security alert button hidden beneath the conference table. "I'm so sorry," Isabel said loudly, kneeling to collect the scattered sugar packets. "How clumsy of me." "Perhaps," Faisal said, his voice carrying new menace, "we should conclude our business more privately away from unnecessary distractions." Isabel felt the security man's attention focus on her like a laser. She'd been identified as a threat, and Faisal's team was preparing to eliminate everyone who could expose their operation. Jason stood slowly, projecting calm authority while his mind raced through escape scenarios. "Gentlemen, I think it's best if we wait for federal agents to arrive. I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about your innovative partnership structures." Faisal's smile turned predatory. "Mr. Reed, I'm afraid federal agents won't be arriving today. You see, some situations require more direct solutions." The security man's hand moved inside his jacket just as the conference room doors burst open. 3 FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn. "Federal agents, nobody move." Isabel collapsed against the conference table in relief as Faisal's team realized their elaborate scheme had crumbled. But as handcuffs clicked around Faisal's wrist, she caught the Sheikh's final words spoken in Arabic with chilling precision. "Find Isabel al-Nadim. This isn't over." Her blood froze as she realized her carefully constructed identity had been blown. Faisal knew exactly who she was and why she'd been able to expose his plan so effectively. Jason was beside her, instantly, his hand steady on her arm. "Isabel, are you all right?" She looked up at him, seeing concern and something deeper in his gray eyes. "Jason, there is something else I need to tell you about why I really knew so much about their operation." "Later," he said firmly. "Right now, we're both safe. That's what matters." But Isabel knew their safety was temporary. Faisal's network was vast and his threat had been very specific. The shy server named Isabel Vega was about to disappear forever. The question was whether Isabel al-Nadim would survive what came next. The FBI safe house in Queens felt like a fortress and a prison simultaneously. Jason Reed paced the hardwood floors while Isabel sat at the kitchen table translating documents the federal agents had seized from Faisal's hotel suite. 3 days had passed since the conference room confrontation, and the investigation was revealing the true scope of the Khalid Group's operation. They've stolen technology from 17 American companies in the past 4 years. Agent Sarah Callahan announced, entering with fresh coffee and manila folders. Your quick thinking saved not just Reed Technologies, but potentially prevented a massive security breach affecting military AI systems. Jason glanced at Isabel, who looked exhausted despite her composed exterior. "What about Faisal's threat? Are we safe here?" "The Khalid Group is more than just corporate espionage," Agent Callahan replied grimly. "We've discovered connections to arms trafficking and technology sales to hostile governments." Sheikh Faisal won't give up easily, especially since Isabel can identify key players in their network. Isabel looked up from the documents, her dark eyes reflecting strain. There's something else you need to know. Faisal called me Isabel Al-Nadim for a reason. Jason felt his world shift again. Al-Nadim, that's not your real name either. It's my birth name, Isabel said quietly. Isabel Al-Nadim was a prominent international lawyer until she discovered her own firm was facilitating these technology thefts. When I tried to expose them, they destroyed my career and threatened my life. Isabel Vega was my witness protection identity. Agent Callahan leaned forward. Isabel, we need you to explain exactly what you discovered about your former firm. Isabel's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a folder. Mansour and Associates wasn't just providing legal services to the Khalid Group. We were creating the fraudulent contracts, establishing the subsidiary companies, and facilitating the technology transfers. I spent 3 years unknowingly helping them steal billions in American intellectual property. Jason sat beside her, drawn by her obvious pain. When did you realize what was happening? 18 months ago, I was reviewing contracts for a client called Quantum Dynamics. The subsidiary transfer clauses were identical to ones I drafted for other clients, but the technology being transferred was military-grade encryption software. Isabel's voice grew steadier as she spoke. I started investigating and discovered that every contract I'd worked on had resulted in American companies losing their most valuable assets. What did you do? Agent Callahan asked. I copied everything: contracts, email communications, bank transfer records. Then I confronted my boss, Dr. Khalil Mansour. Isabel's laugh was bitter. He offered me a promotion and $1 million bonus to forget what I discovered. Jason felt rage building in his chest. They tried to buy your silence. When I refused, they tried intimidation. When that failed, they tried to have me killed. Isabel met Jason's eyes and he saw the fear she'd been hiding. A car bomb destroyed my apartment in Geneva. If I hadn't been working late at the office, I would have died. The room fell silent except for the hum of the safe house's security systems. Jason reached for Isabel's hand without thinking, surprised when she didn't pull away. The witness protection program gave me a new identity and relocated me to New York, Isabel continued. But I couldn't stop thinking about all the American companies being destroyed by contracts I'd helped create. When I discovered Faisal was targeting Reed Technologies, I knew I had to act. Agent Callahan studied Isabel with professional interest. You risked everything to save a company you'd never worked for. Isabel's eyes found Jason's again. I risked everything to save a man who didn't deserve to be destroyed by my mistakes. The intensity in her voice made Jason's pulse quicken. Despite everything, the danger, the deception, the impossible circumstances, he was falling for this brilliant, courageous woman who'd sacrificed her safety to protect his dream. Isabel, he said softly, you saved my company and possibly my life. You don't owe me anything. Don't I? She turned to face him fully. I helped create the weapons they used against you. Every fraudulent contract, every stolen patent, every destroyed American business, I made that possible. Jason squeezed her hand gently. You also made it possible to stop them. Agent Callahan's radio crackled with urgent communication. After a brief conversation, she turned back to them with a grim expression. We've got a problem. Faisal made bail through diplomatic channels. He's officially been declared persona non grata and ordered to leave the country. But, Jason prompted, but 3 of his associates are still in New York, and we've intercepted communications suggesting they plan to eliminate Isabel before leaving. Isabel went pale. How long do we have? Our surveillance suggests they've located this safe house. We need to move you both immediately. Jason stood, pulling Isabel to her feet. Where? There's a secure federal facility upstate. You'll be completely protected until we can... The lights went out. In the darkness, Jason heard Agent Callahan curse and reach for her radio. All units, we have a breach at the safe house. Repeat, we have a hostile breach. Isabel's hand found Jason's in the darkness, her fingers intertwining with his. Jason, if something happens to me, you need to know. Nothing's going to happen to you, he said fiercely, pulling her closer. The sound of breaking glass came from the front of the house, followed by shouted commands in Arabic. Agent Callahan pushed them toward the back exit, her weapon drawn. Move now. Jason wrapped his arm around Isabel's waist, guiding her through the dark hallway toward the rear of the house. Behind them, he could hear multiple voices coordinating a systematic search. "The garage," Agent Callahan whispered. "There's an armored vehicle. We can—" A gunshot echoed through the house, and Agent Callahan stumbled. Isabel caught her arm, steadying her as blood spread across the agent's shoulder. "I'm fine," Callahan gasped. "Keep moving." Jason felt Isabel's body trembling against his, but her voice remained steady. "There's a window in the laundry room. We can reach the neighbor's yard." "How do you know that?" "I memorized every exit the first day we arrived." Even in mortal danger, Isabel's intelligence amazed him. Jason helped Agent Callahan while Isabel led them through the dark house with confident precision. Behind them, the voices grew closer. They reached the laundry room just as flashlight beams began sweeping the hallway behind them. Isabel quietly opened the window while Jason helped the wounded agent. "You first," Isabel whispered to Callahan. "No, you're the primary target. Go." Isabel hesitated, clearly torn between self-preservation and protecting the injured agent. Jason made the decision for her, lifting her toward the window. "I'm not losing you," he said quietly. "Not after everything we've been through." As Isabel slipped through the window, their eyes met in the dim light filtering from outside. In that moment, Jason realized that somewhere between corporate espionage and federal safe houses, he'd fallen completely in love with her. "Jason," she whispered urgently from outside. "Hurry." He helped Agent Callahan through the window, then followed just as footsteps reached the laundry room. They ran across the neighbor's yard, staying low and moving toward the street where backup federal vehicles were arriving with sirens wailing. As they reached the safety of an FBI tactical van, Jason saw Isabel's expression in the flashing emergency lights. She looked relieved but also resigned, like someone preparing for an inevitable goodbye. "Isabel, what is it?" She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Jason, there is something else. Something that changes everything between us." Before she could continue, the emergency medical personnel surrounded them, tending to Callahan's wound, while tactical agents debriefed them about the attack. The moment for personal revelations passed as they were quickly moved to another vehicle and whisked away from the compromised location. The federal courthouse in Manhattan buzzed with activity as Isabel prepared to testify before a grand jury investigating the Khalid Investment Group's international fraud network. Jason sat in the witness waiting area, watching her review her notes with the focused intensity he'd come to admire over the past week. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, moving to sit beside her. "Agent Callahan said they have enough evidence from the documents to proceed without your testimony." Isabel looked up from her legal pad, her dark eyes reflecting determination mixed with fear. "Jason, without my testimony explaining how the contracts were structured, they might only get convictions for fraud. With my testimony, they can prove conspiracy to commit espionage and technology theft. The difference is 5 years versus life sentences." Jason reached for her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "And the difference for you is continued witness protection versus having your real identity exposed to every news outlet in the country." "I know the risks." "Do you—" Jason studied her face, seeing the woman he'd fallen in love with beneath the brave exterior. "Once you testify as Isabel Al-Nadim Al-H, former attorney for Mansour and Associates, your life as Isabel Vega disappears forever. Faisal's associates will spend the rest of their lives trying to find you." Isabel's smile was sad but resolute. "My life as Isabel Vega was never real anyway. It was just borrowed time." Before Jason could respond, the door opened, and Dr. Khalil Mansour entered in handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals. The man who had once been Isabel's boss and mentor looked older and smaller than Jason had expected, but his eyes burned with hatred when they fixed on Isabel. "Isabel Al-Nadim," Khalil said in accented English, his voice carrying old affection twisted into malice. "My most promising student. I taught you everything you knew about international law, and this is how you repay me." Isabel stood facing the man who had destroyed her life with dignity that took Jason's breath away. "You taught me to recognize justice, Dr. Mansour. I'm simply practicing what you preached before you forgot your own principles." Khalil's laugh was bitter. "Principles? Isabel, we were making millions while helping developing nations access technology that American companies hoarded selfishly. We were leveling the playing field." "We were stealing," Isabel replied firmly, "and you know it. I know that you were living in a penthouse apartment in Geneva, driving a Maserati and earning more money than most people see in a lifetime. All of that disappeared the moment you decided to develop a conscience. Jason felt rage building as he watched Khalil try to manipulate Isabel with reminders of her former lifestyle. But Isabel's response surprised them both. "You're right," she said calmly. "I had everything money could buy, but I didn't have the ability to sleep at night, knowing that my legal expertise was being used to destroy innocent people's dreams." She gestured toward Jason. "Do you know what Jason Reed was doing the night before you planned to steal his company? He was in his office at 2 in the morning personally reviewing employee benefit packages to make sure his staff could afford their children's medical care. This is the man you wanted to destroy for profit." Khalil's eyes shifted to Jason with cold assessment. "Ah, yes, the idealistic young American. Tell me, Mr. Reed, are you prepared for what loving Isabel al-Nadim will cost you?" Jason stepped closer to Isabel, putting his arm around her protectively. "I'm prepared for anything. Are you prepared for the fact that she's worth approximately $400 million? The words hit Jason like a physical blow. Isabel's face went white and she turned to stare at Khalil with horror. "What did you just say?" Jason asked quietly. Khalil smiled with malicious satisfaction. "Didn't she tell you Isabel al-Nadim isn't just a brilliant attorney? She's the sole heir to the al-Nadim shipping fortune. Her father's business empire is worth nearly $500 million, all of it sitting in Swiss accounts waiting for her to claim it." Jason felt the floor shift beneath his feet. "Isabel." Isabel's voice was barely above a whisper. "Jason, I can explain. The only reason she was working for our firm," Khalil continued, clearly enjoying their shock, "was because her father wanted her to understand international business before inheriting his empire. She was never a regular employee. She was playing at being a lawyer." Jason stepped back slightly, his mind reeling. "You're a billionaire." "I was supposed to be," Isabel said, tears forming in her eyes. "But when I discovered what Khalil's firm was really doing, I couldn't claim money that might have been earned through association with criminals. I've been living on witness protection stipends because I refused to access funds that might be connected to stolen technology." The complexity of her sacrifice hit Jason like a tidal wave. She hadn't just given up her career and safety. She'd given up a fortune to expose the truth. "Isabel," he said softly, "why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew how you'd react," she replied, her voice breaking. "You built your company from nothing. You're proud of earning everything yourself. How could I tell you that I was born into wealth beyond anything you have achieved?" Khalil laughed cruelly. "She's right to worry, Mr. Reed. Can your masculine pride handle being with the woman who could buy your little company a dozen times over?" Jason felt anger surge through him, not at Isabel, but at Khalil's attempt to destroy what they'd built together. "Dr. Mansour, you clearly don't understand what kind of man Isabel chose to love." He turned to Isabel, cupping her face in his hands. "Do you really think I care about money? Isabel, you gave up $400 million to save my company and countless others. You're the most selfless, courageous person I've ever met." "But the difference between us," Isabel began. "The difference between us," Jason interrupted, "is that you're better than me in every way that matters. You're smarter, braver, and more principled. If anything, I should be worried about whether I'm good enough for you." Isabel's tears spilled over as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. "Jason, I love you. But my money, my family's business, it complicates everything." "No," Jason said firmly, pulling her closer. "It doesn't complicate anything. We'll figure it out together." The federal marshals began moving Khalil toward the door, but he called back one final threat. "Isabel, claiming your inheritance means revealing your location to every one of Faisal's associates worldwide. Your father's fortune comes with a target on your back." Yes, as the door closed behind Khalil, Isabel collapsed against Jason, overwhelmed by the weight of decisions that would define the rest of their lives. "Jason," she whispered, "there's something else I need to tell you. Something I discovered in the Khalid Group's files that I think connects to your father." Jason stiffened. "My father, what are you talking about?" Before Isabel could answer, Agent Callahan entered the room, her arm in a sling from the gunshot wound. "We need to move. Your testimony is scheduled in 30 minutes. Isabel squeezed Jason's hand. "Tonight. I promise I'll explain everything tonight." The grand jury room felt cavernous and cold as Isabel took the stand. For 4 hours, she meticulously detailed the inner workings of the Khalid Group's fraud network explaining contract clauses and technology transfer mechanisms with clarity that captivated every juror. Jason watched from a small viewing area, his heart swelling with pride at her courage and brilliance. When they finally left the courthouse, night had fallen over Manhattan. A federal security detail escorted them to a new safe house in Brooklyn Heights, a brownstone with bulletproof windows and cutting-edge security systems. Once inside, Jason turned to Isabel. "Now tell me what you found about my father." Isabel took a deep breath and removed a folder from her briefcase. "When I was translating the files from Faisal's hotel room, I found several references to something called Project Artemis. It was a military AI development program from 7 years ago. That was just before my father died." Jason said, his voice tight. "He worked on early AI applications for defense systems." "I know," Isabel said quietly. "The files mentioned William Reed specifically. Your father wasn't just working on any AI system, Jason. He was developing an algorithm to detect fraud in defense contracts." Jason sank onto the couch. "That's impossible. He never mentioned anything like that to me." "According to these documents, your father discovered that a group called Prometheus was systematically stealing billions from military contracts through a complex network of shell companies and inflated invoices. He designed an AI to track and expose them. Prometheus, not the Khalid group." Isabel spread several documents on the coffee table. "Prometheus is much bigger than Khalid or Mansour. It's a shadow organization of billionaires, corporations, and corrupt officials who control technology development and acquisition across multiple countries. The Khalid group is just one of their procurement arms." Jason's mind raced. If my father was developing technology to expose them, why didn't he go public with it? Isabel's eyes met his, filled with sorrow. "Jason, the final document I found was a Prometheus executive order dated 2 weeks before your father's death. It authorized the permanent resolution of the Artemis threat." The implication hit Jason with devastating force. "Are you telling me my father was murdered?" "The order was signed by someone with the codename Hephaestus. And look at this." Isabel pointed to a medical report in Arabic. "This document describes the administration of a compound that causes rapid cellular deterioration, similar to aggressive cancer." Jason's hands began to shake as he stared at the file. "My father died of lung cancer. That's what all the doctors said. This compound mimics cancer perfectly, but it moves much faster. It's undetectable unless someone is specifically looking for it." Isabel took Jason's trembling hands. "I'm so sorry, Jason, but I think your father discovered something so dangerous that they couldn't let him live." "And my AI," Jason whispered, the pieces suddenly clicking into horrible clarity. "It's based on my father's original algorithms. I've been unknowingly continuing his work all this time. That's why the Khalid group targeted your company so aggressively. Your AI could potentially do what your father's program was designed to do: expose the entire Prometheus network." Jason stood abruptly, pacing the room as memories flooded back. His father's sudden insistence on teaching him everything about his work in those final months. The cryptic advice to look beyond the obvious patterns in data analysis. The deathbed gift of his cherished Rolex with the inscription, "The truth waits for the right moment." "He knew," Jason said, his voice breaking. "He knew they were killing him, but he couldn't tell me. He was protecting me by keeping me ignorant." Isabel moved to his side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "He also gave you everything you needed to finish what he started. The core algorithms, the programming approach. All of it was designed to eventually uncover what he'd found." Jason touched his father's watch, seeing it with new understanding. "All this time I thought I was building his legacy by growing the company. But his real legacy was the truth." That night, sleep eluded both of them. They sat in the kitchen of the safe house, sharing a bottle of wine, as Jason told stories of his father. The brilliant engineer, the patient teacher, the man who spent weekends helping veterans learn computer skills. "He would have loved you," Jason said, a sad smile crossing his face. "He always said I needed someone smarter than me to keep me humble." Isabel laughed softly. "And he would have been proud of what you've built." "I'm not sure anymore," Jason admitted. "If his work was meant to expose corruption, and I've been using those same algorithms for military contracts without understanding their true purpose, have I really honored his legacy at all?" "You built exactly what he would have wanted," Isabel said firmly. a foundation strong enough to finish what he started. Jason's eyes met hers across the kitchen table. What are you suggesting? Your AI system with some modifications could track and expose the entire Prometheus network. We have enough information from the Khalid files to reconstruct what your father was looking for. You want to take on an international conspiracy that killed my father and tried to kill you, a group powerful enough to manipulate global finance and technology. Isabel's expression grew determined. What's the alternative? Live in hiding forever. Let them continue stealing technology and corrupting governments. Your father gave his life to expose this, Jason. He literally coded his legacy for you to find. Jason stared at his father's watch for a long moment, then looked up with steel in his eyes. Where do we start? For the next 2 days, they worked relentlessly. Jason accessed Reed Technologies' servers, remotely digging into the core algorithms that his father had designed. Isabel pored over the Khalid documents, identifying key Prometheus financial patterns and shell company structures. Together, they began reconstructing the detection system William Reed had envisioned. On the third morning, Agent Callahan arrived with news. The grand jury has returned indictments against Khalid Mansour and 6 others. But Khalil is talking, offering names in exchange for leniency. What names? Isabel asked, looking up from her laptop. High-ranking officials, corporate executives. He claims there's a larger organization behind everything. Callahan gave them a pointed look. Sound familiar? Isabel and Jason exchanged glances. How much do you know about Prometheus? Jason asked carefully. Enough to know it's not officially supposed to exist, Callahan replied, and enough to know that people who investigate it tend to have unfortunate accidents. Like my father, Jason's voice was tight. Callahan's expression softened. We found the same documents Isabel showed you. Our analysts agree that William Reed was likely targeted because of his work. I'm sorry, Jason. So what now? Isabel asked. We just drop it and let these people continue operating. I didn't say that, Callahan responded, setting her coffee mug down firmly. The Bureau has been trying to build a case against Prometheus for years, but we've never had enough evidence to tie all the pieces together. Jason leaned forward. What if we could give you that evidence? What if we could track every transaction, every shell company, every fraudulent contract in their network? How? So, my father's algorithms, Jason explained. They were designed to detect exactly the kind of financial manipulation Prometheus uses. With Isabel's knowledge of their legal structures and my AI expertise, we've been rebuilding his detection system. Callahan looked skeptical. And you think you can accomplish in a few days what federal investigators haven't managed in years? We have something they don't, Isabel said. The original architect's blueprints and his son, who inherited his genius. Jason felt a flush of pride at Isabel's words. For the first time since learning the truth about his father's death, he felt something beyond grief, a sense of purpose, of continuity. He was truly carrying on William Reed's legacy. If we do this, Callahan said slowly, you need to understand the risks. Prometheus has infiltrated governments, corporations, intelligence agencies. If they realize what you're doing, they'll come at you with everything they have. They already killed my father and tried to steal my company, Jason said grimly. I'd say we're already on their radar. And I've been running from them for 18 months, Isabel added. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. Callahan studied them both and nodded sharply. All right, you'll have full FBI resources and protection. But this operation stays completely off the books. Only my most trusted team will know the details. Over the next week, their lives fell into an intense rhythm. During the day, Jason coded while Isabel analyzed financial data. At night, they shared quiet dinners in the safe house, their conversation ranging from childhood memories to future dreams. Despite the danger surrounding them, or perhaps because of it, their bond deepened. Tell me about your father, Jason asked one evening as they sat on the small rooftop terrace, the Brooklyn Bridge glittering across the East River. The shipping magnate who sent his daughter to become an international lawyer. Isabel smiled softly. Tariq al-Nadim was a self-made man. He started with one cargo ship and built an empire of 80 vessels operating across 3 continents. But he was old-fashioned, wanted me to understand the business from every angle before taking over. He sounds like my father, Jason observed. William Reed believed you couldn't lead what you didn't understand down to its foundations. They would have gotten along well, Isabel agreed. My father insisted I learn international law because shipping crosses so many jurisdictions. He never imagined I'd discover a criminal enterprise at my own firm. Do you think he knew anything about Prometheus? Isabel's expression grew troubled. I've been wondering that same thing. The Al Nadim Shipping Company handles cargo for many defense contractors. What if some of those shipments were part of the fraud? My father or his executives might have facilitated unknowingly. Is that why you haven't claimed your inheritance? Jason asked gently. Fear that it might be tainted. Partly, Isabel admitted, but mostly because accessing those accounts would immediately reveal my location. The Swiss banks have reporting requirements that Prometheus could monitor. Jason took her hand. When this is over, when Prometheus is exposed, you'll be able to reclaim your name, your heritage, everything they took from you. What about us? Isabel asked quietly. Will your pride really be able to handle my family fortune? Jason laughed softly. Isabel, I fell in love with a woman I thought was a coffee server. Learning you were a brilliant lawyer didn't change my feelings. Finding out you're an heiress won't either. He kissed her hand. Besides, Reed Technologies is about to release a groundbreaking AI security system. I might catch up to your net worth sooner than you think. Isabel's laughter was interrupted by Agent Callahan bursting onto the terrace. We've got movement. Khalil Mansour was found dead in his cell an hour ago, made to look like suicide. The joy drained from Isabel's face. They're cleaning house. It gets worse, Callahan continued grimly. We've intercepted communications suggesting Prometheus knows about your investigation. They've deployed assets to New York specifically to target you both. How? Jason demanded. This operation is completely off the books. They must have sources inside the Bureau, Callahan said. We need to move you immediately. The safe house is compromised. No, Jason said firmly. We're too close to finding what we need. My program is nearly finished parsing the financial data. Jason, these people killed Khalil in federal custody. Isabel argued. They can reach us anywhere. Exactly, he countered. So running just delays the inevitable. We need to finish this now while we still can. Callahan's radio crackled with an urgent message. Her face paled as she listened. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north and east. We have less than 5 minutes. The program needs at least 20 minutes to complete its analysis, Jason said, already moving toward the stairs. We have to buy time. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. Callahan deployed her agents around the perimeter while Jason transferred his program to a secure cloud server. Isabel gathered the most crucial documents preparing for their escape. Jason, she called from the bedroom. Look at this. He joined her, finding her staring at her laptop screen. What is it? I've been cross-referencing Prometheus leadership mentions in the Khalid files. The name Hephaestus appears repeatedly, the same signature on the order targeting your father. Do you know who it is? Isabel nodded, her face ashen. Based on context and timeline analysis, there's only one possibility. She turned the screen toward him. Senator Victor Harrington, chairman of the Defense Appropriations Committee. Jason stared at the evidence in shock. A sitting U.S. senator is running Prometheus. It makes perfect sense, Isabel said grimly. He's overseen trillions in defense spending over the past decade. He would have the access and authority to divert funds through fraudulent contracts. The windows downstairs shattered as the first explosive charge detonated. Callahan rushed into the room. They're here. We need to move now. Jason downloaded the Hephaestus files to a secure drive as gunfire erupted outside. The tunnel exit, Callahan shouted over the noise. Now, they raced down to the basement where a maintenance tunnel led to an adjacent building. As they reached the tunnel entrance, a massive explosion rocked the house above them, sending dust and debris raining down. They're trying to bring down the building on top of us, Callahan yelled, pushing them forward. The narrow tunnel was pitch black, save for the beam of Callahan's flashlight. They moved as quickly as possible, the sounds of destruction growing more distant behind them. Almost there, Callahan assured them, as a faint light appeared ahead. The tunnel exit led to a parking garage where an unmarked FBI vehicle waited. They piled in, Callahan taking the wheel and speeding up the ramp onto the Brooklyn streets. Where are we going? Isabel asked, clinging to Jason as the car swerved through traffic. Secure location outside the city, Callahan replied tersely. We have a tech hub there where Jason can finish his program. As they crossed the bridge into Manhattan, Jason checked the secure drive. Isabel, look at this. The program completed its initial analysis before we escaped. She leaned over to see his screen, her eyes widening. My God, it's worse than we thought. The screen displayed a complex network of shell companies all converging on a central hub controlled by Senator Harrington. Billions of dollars flowed through this structure, skimmed from defense contracts over the past decade. $50 billion, Isabel whispered. They've stolen $50 billion from American taxpayers and sold military technology to hostile governments, Jason added, scrolling through the data, including the encryption software your client was developing when you discovered the fraud. Isabel's face hardened with resolve. We need to get this to the Justice Department immediately. We will, Callahan assured her, but first we need to make sure you both survive to testify. As they drove north out of the city, Jason noticed a black SUV maintaining distance behind them. I think we're being followed. Callahan checked the rearview mirror. Good eye, hold on. She executed a sudden turn, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic. The SUV followed, accelerating to close the distance. Definitely not friendly, Callahan muttered, pulling her weapon with one hand while steering with the other. Jason, take the wheel. He reached over, gripping the steering wheel as Callahan leaned out the window and fired 3 precise shots at the pursuing vehicle's front tire. The SUV swerved violently, crashing into a row of parked cars. Won't stop them for long, Callahan said, resuming control of the vehicle. They'll have backup. Sure enough, 2 more black SUVs appeared behind them, gaining rapidly. We can't outrun them, Isabel realized. We need to change vehicles. Grand Central, Callahan decided, making a sharp turn downtown. We can lose them in the crowd and take the train north. They abandoned the car 2 blocks from the station, moving quickly through the evening commuters flooding the streets. Inside the vast terminal, Callahan guided them toward the tracks. Northeast Regional departs in 7 minutes, she said, purchasing tickets at a kiosk. We'll get off at a random stop and arrange new transportation. As they moved toward the platform, Jason noticed men in suits entering the main concourse, scanning the crowd systematically. Prometheus agents, he warned quietly, at all the entrances. Callahan assessed the situation with a professional eye. Too many civilians for them to act openly. Stay close and keep your heads down. They merged with a large group boarding the train, managing to secure seats in the middle of a crowded car. As the train pulled away from the platform, Jason caught a glimpse of frustrated men in suits, watching helplessly. We made it, Isabel breathed, leaning against him in exhaustion. For now, Callahan cautioned him, but they'll check camera footage and figure out which train we boarded. We need to be off this train before they can mobilize teams at the next stations. Jason checked his secure drive again. The program is still running advanced analysis. It's mapping the entire Prometheus network, following every transaction to its source. Isabel studied the emerging data. Jason, look at this pattern. All these transactions route through the same Swiss bank before dispersing globally. On the same bank that holds your family's accounts, Jason realized. Isabel's eyes widened in sudden understanding. My God, what if my father wasn't just an innocent shipping magnate? What if he discovered what Prometheus was doing through his business? You think your father was targeted like mine? Jason asked softly. He died in a sailing accident 6 years ago. Isabel said, her voice hollow. His boat mysteriously sank in perfect weather. I never questioned it until now. Callahan leaned in, keeping her voice low. Isabel, was your father's death before or after William Reed's? 3 months before, Isabel whispered. Which means they might have been working together. Jason finished the revelation, hitting him like a thunderbolt. My father was developing AI to track financial fraud. Your father owned a global shipping company that might have seen suspicious cargo movements. 2 men with the expertise and access to expose Prometheus, Callahan concluded, both dying under questionable circumstances within months of each other. Isabel's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, accessing an encrypted email account. I have some of my father's old files stored in a private cloud. I never connected them to any of this. She navigated to a folder labeled Reed Consulting and opened it to reveal dozens of documents and spreadsheets. Reed Consulting, Jason repeated, his voice tight with emotion. My father's side business. He said it was just small technical projects to supplement his income. Isabel opened one document revealing a complex analysis of shipping manifests compared against defense contract deliverables. They were definitely working together. Your father was analyzing my father's shipping data to find discrepancies. They were building a case, Jason realized, together. And they both died before they could complete it, Callahan added grimly. Isabel looked up at Jason, tears shining in her eyes. All this time our paths were meant to cross. Your father and mine started this journey together. And now we're finishing it, Jason said, taking her hand firmly in his. Together. The train began slowing as they approached the first station north of the city. Callahan rose, gesturing for them to follow. This is where we get off. I have a team meeting us with secure transport to the tech facility. As they disembarked onto a quiet suburban platform, Jason felt a strange sense of peace despite the danger. His father's legacy wasn't just Reed Technologies. It was a quest for truth, for justice, for exposing corruption that preyed on American innovation. And somehow, against all odds, he'd found the perfect partner to complete that mission. The daughter of his father's ally, a woman whose courage and brilliance matched his own. Isabel, he said quietly as they moved toward the waiting FBI vehicles. When this is over, when Prometheus is exposed and we can stop running, I want to rebuild both legacies the right way. Your father's shipping company, my father's technology vision, all of it dedicated to transparency and accountability. Isabel squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting the same determination he felt. The Reed Al-Nadim legacy, I think they would approve. As they settled into the secure vehicle, Jason's secure drive pinged with an alert. The program had completed its full analysis, mapping every aspect of Prometheus's criminal empire. The evidence they needed to expose Senator Harrington and his entire network was now in their hands. We've got them. Jason said, his voice filled with quiet triumph. All of them. Isabel leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion and hope mingling in her expression. Now we just have to live long enough to tell the world. The car accelerated into the gathering darkness, carrying with it the legacy of two fathers and the future of their children. A future that would be forged through danger, determination, and an unexpected love born in the shadow of conspiracy. The FBI technology facility in upstate New York resembled a corporate retreat more than a government installation. Nestled among dense pine forests, the modernist building of glass and steel housed some of the Bureau's most advanced digital resources. For 3 days, Jason and Isabel worked relentlessly, compiling their evidence against Prometheus into an airtight case. The connection map is complete, Jason announced, leaning back from his workstation, where multiple screens displayed intricate webs of financial transactions. $53 billion diverted from defense contracts over 12 years, all traceable back to Senator Harrington and his inner circle. Agent Callahan reviewed the data, her expression grim. The scope is even worse than we thought. 27 defense contractors, 15 senior military officials, 9 congressmen, and 4 cabinet-level officials, all implicated. Isabel looked up from her own station where she'd been analyzing legal documents. Not to mention 34 executives from major corporations and 17 foreign officials. Prometheus has effectively created a shadow government controlling military technology development worldwide. And now we have proof, Jason said, his voice reflecting both exhaustion and triumph. Every transaction, every shell company, every fraudulent contract, all documented and verified by my father's algorithms. He zoomed in on one particular node in the network display. This is especially damning. Senator Harrington personally authorized the diversion of funds from the Artemis defense system. The very program my father was working on. He literally stole from my father's project to fund the operation that killed him. Callahan nodded. The Justice Department task force arrives tomorrow morning. Once they verify the evidence, they'll coordinate simultaneous arrests across multiple jurisdictions. What about Senator Harrington? Isabel asked. Taking down a sitting senator, especially one as powerful as the Defense Appropriations Chairman, won't be easy. The evidence against him is overwhelming, Callahan assured them. His code name appears on direct orders for illegal technology transfers. And she hesitated, her eyes meeting Jason's. And on the termination orders for William Reed. Jason felt a cold resolve hardening in his chest. After a lifetime believing his father had died from natural causes, the confirmation that he'd been murdered by a corrupt senator cut deep. But alongside the pain came a sense of clarity. His father's legacy wasn't just the technology he'd created. It was his moral courage, his refusal to look away from corruption, even when it cost him everything. Tomorrow we finish what our father started, Jason said quietly to Isabel. 7 years of justice delayed. Isabel reached across the table, taking his hand. Justice, not vengeance, she reminded him gently. That's what they would have wanted. Later that afternoon, as a technician brought them coffee, Jason noticed Isabel staring at a photograph of William Reed they had found in the Khalid files. He looks just like you, she observed. Same eyes, same determined expression. Jason smiled sadly. He was the most principled man I've ever known. Always said that technology was neutral. It was the purpose behind it that mattered. He believed AI could make the world more transparent, more accountable. Is that why you continued his work, to honor that belief? Initially, I just wanted to prove I could do what he did, Jason admitted. Build something revolutionary, make a name for myself. It wasn't until recently that I understood what really mattered to him wasn't the technology itself, but what it could reveal. Isabel nodded thoughtfully. My father was similar. Shipping wasn't his passion, justice was. He built his fleet to connect worlds, not just to make money. She hesitated. I've been wondering if he suspected something long before he died. He was always teaching me to look for discrepancies in manifest, to question when cargo didn't match documentation. They were both teachers preparing their children for a battle they knew was coming, Jason realized, even if they couldn't tell us directly. I found something else while searching through my father's archives, Isabel said, pulling out her tablet. Look at this, a photo from a maritime security conference in San Diego 7 years ago. Jason leaned in to see the screen, his breath catching. There in the grainy conference photo stood William Reed and Tariq Al-Nadim, deep in conversation at a reception. His father looked healthy but serious months before his diagnosis. They did know each other, Jason whispered, touching the screen. How did they meet? According to my father's calendar entries, they were both on a Department of Defense advisory panel about supply chain security, Isabel explained. Your father was presenting on AI applications for detecting anomalies in defense procurement, and my father was there representing the shipping industry's perspective. Two honest men in positions to see the whole picture, Jason said, each with half of the puzzle, and both smart enough to connect the dots and realize what they were seeing wasn't just inefficiency or isolated fraud. It was systematic theft on a massive scale. That night in the secure quarters provided by the FBI, Jason found himself unable to sleep. He sat by the window staring out at moonlight, filtering through pine branches, his father's Rolex heavy on his wrist. Tomorrow would change everything. Bringing down Prometheus would not only secure justice for their fathers, but transform the landscape of defense contracting worldwide. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Isabel entered, wrapped in a borrowed FBI sweatshirt that fell to her knees, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Can't sleep either, she asked, settling beside him on the window seat. Too much on my mind, he admitted. After tomorrow, Senator Harrington and his entire network will face justice. But what comes next for us? You mean after we stop being fugitives hiding from international assassins? Isabel smiled, though her eyes remained serious. I've been thinking about that too. Your inheritance will be released, Jason said. $400 million in a shipping empire waiting for its rightful leader. And Reed Technologies will likely triple in value once the government sees how effective your father's algorithms are at detecting fraud, she countered. You'll be a billionaire tech CEO overnight. Jason took her hand, tracing her palm with his thumb. Two separate empires on different continents. Not exactly conducive to building a life together. Isabel studied his face in the moonlight. Unless we combine them, what are you suggesting? The Reed Al-Nadim Foundation, she said, her eyes brightening with purpose. We use both fortunes to create something new. Transparency technology for global commerce, picking up exactly where our fathers left off. Jason felt something unlock in his chest. Not just defense contracts, but global supply chains, financial systems, making corruption harder everywhere. Isabel finished. It's what they were trying to do together. It's the legacy they really wanted to leave. Jason cupped her face gently. Isabel Al-Nadim, I think I fell in love with you the moment you knocked over that sugar bowl to warn me about paragraph 12.3. Her laugh was soft in the darkness. And I fell in love with you when you believed a coffee server over a billionaire investor without hesitation. Most men in your position would have dismissed me immediately. I've never been most men, Jason murmured, drawing her closer. No, she agreed, her lips meeting his. You're much better. As they held each other in the moonlight, the facility's perimeter alarm suddenly blared to life, then fell silent just as quickly. Jason and Isabel froze, exchanging alarmed glances. That wasn't a test, Jason whispered, moving to the communications panel. He pressed the emergency button, but nothing happened. The system's down. Isabel was already at the window, peering into the darkness. Movement in the trees, she reported tensely. Multiple figures approaching from the north perimeter. Prometheus, Jason concluded grimly. They're making their move before we can hand over the evidence. He grabbed his secure laptop and drive while Isabel collected the most crucial documents. They slipped into the hallway, finding it eerily deserted. Where are the guards? Isabel whispered. A muffled thud from the security office answered her question. Jason cautiously pushed the door open to find two FBI agents unconscious on the floor, the surveillance monitors dark. They've disabled the security systems, he realized. We need to find Callahan. They moved silently through the darkened corridors, the emergency lights casting everything in an ominous red glow. Distant sounds of struggle echoed through the facility. This way, Isabel urged, pulling Jason toward a service stairwell. Callahan said her quarters were on the lower level. They descended quickly, emerging into a corridor, just as a tactical team in black combat gear rounded the far corner. The lead operator spotted them, immediately raising his weapon. Run, Jason shouted, pulling Isabel back through the doorway as bullets splintered the frame behind them. They raced up the stairs, emerging on a different floor. Callahan had shown them the facility layout on the first day. Always know your escape routes. And Jason now mentally reviewed the floor plan. The server room, he decided. It's reinforced, and there's a direct line to the Justice Department from there. They navigated the maze-like corridors twice, having to duck into side rooms to avoid Prometheus operatives sweeping the building. The facility had clearly been compromised at multiple points, with most of the FBI personnel either neutralized or pinned down in defensive positions. Finally, they reached the server room, only to find the door already open. Inside, a team of technicians in Prometheus tactical gear were systematically removing hard drives. They're stealing the evidence, Isabel whispered in horror. Jason pulled her back before they could be spotted. Not all of it. I made a backup on my secure drive, and I uploaded critical files to my private cloud server. A sudden commotion from the main atrium drew the attention of the Prometheus team. Jason caught fragments of radio chatter. FBI reinforcements. Perimeter breach. Expedite extraction. Looks like the cavalry might be arriving, he whispered to Isabel. We need to secure ourselves until then. The biotech lab, Isabel suggested. It has an isolation chamber with reinforced walls. They made their way to the facility's research wing, moving from shadow to shadow. The lab was deserted, equipment still humming with power despite the security breach. The isolation chamber, a cube of ballistic glass and steel used for containing hazardous materials, stood in the center. It locks from the inside, Jason noted, examining the control panel. Once sealed, it requires biometric authorization to open. They slipped inside, securing the heavy door behind them. The chamber's independent air system hummed to life, and emergency power illuminated the interior with sterile white light. Now we wait, Isabel said, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Jason activated his secure laptop, connecting it to the facility's backup systems. Let's do more than wait, he said grimly. Let's make sure all this evidence survives no matter what happens to us. He began creating a distributed backup protocol, splitting the Prometheus files into encrypted packets and routing them to secure servers worldwide. News organizations, intelligence agencies, Interpol, each gets a piece of the puzzle, automatically unlocking if I don't enter a cancellation code every hour. A dead man's switch, Isabel realized. Brilliant. Jason worked rapidly, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Outside the isolation chamber, they could hear the distant sounds of gunfire intensifying. Something big is happening, Isabel observed, watching the corridor through the glass walls. That sounds like a serious firefight. Jason finished his programming with a flourish. Done. Even if they get to us, the evidence is secure. Through the glass walls of the isolation chamber, they saw flashes of gunfire and heard shouted commands as FBI tactical teams engaged the Prometheus operatives. The chaos lasted for nearly an hour before Agent Callahan appeared in the lab doorway, her weapon drawn and a cut above her eye. Thank God, she said, holstering her pistol when she spotted them. We've secured the facility, but not before they destroyed the main server room. They were thorough. It doesn't matter, Jason said as they emerged from the chamber. I've backed up everything and implemented a fail-safe distribution system. Even if they'd captured us, the evidence would have gone public within the hour. Callahan looked impressed. Smart move. The reinforcements arrived just in time. We had intelligence that Senator Harrington himself was planning to oversee this operation personally. Fortunately, our counterattack forced him to abort. He would have come himself, Isabel asked, shocked at the audacity. Powerful men often believe they're untouchable, Callahan replied grimly, but his willingness to risk exposure shows how desperate they've become. We need to move quickly before they can regroup. Throughout the night, FBI technical teams worked to restore communications and secure the facility. By dawn, the Justice Department task force had arrived earlier than planned due to the attack. 20 senior officials, including the Deputy Attorney General herself, assembled to review the evidence Jason and Isabel had compiled. For 4 hours, they methodically presented their findings, explaining the complex network of fraud that had ensnared American defense contracting for over a decade. The room fell into stunned silence as the true scope of Prometheus's operation became clear. The scale is unprecedented. The Deputy AG acknowledged, her expression grave. But the evidence is irrefutable. Senator Harrington has betrayed his oath of office in the most fundamental way imaginable. We'll need your testimony, she continued, addressing Jason and Isabel, both about the evidence itself and about the attempts on your lives. We're ready, Jason assured her. Good. We've prepared sealed indictments for 78 individuals based on your evidence. Arrests will begin tomorrow at dawn, coordinated across 12 countries. What about Harrington? Isabel asked. The senator is currently at his Virginia estate for the congressional recess. FBI tactical teams are already in position. He'll be taken into custody at 6 a.m. tomorrow. As the meeting concluded, Callahan approached them with concern etched on her face. We've intercepted communications suggesting Prometheus suspects we're close to moving against them. They've activated emergency protocols. What does that mean? Jason asked. They're destroying evidence and preparing contingencies. Callahan lowered her voice. And they've sent a specialized team specifically targeting both of you. Former intelligence operators, the best money can buy. Isabel tensed. They're coming here. We don't think they know this location yet, but we can't rule it out. We're doubling security and moving you to the most secure section of the facility tonight. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the pine forest, the facility transformed into a fortress. Additional agents patrolled the perimeter, while technical teams monitored surveillance systems for any sign of intrusion. Jason and Isabel were relocated to a reinforced safe room deep within the building's core. One more night, Isabel said as they settled into the sparse quarters. By this time tomorrow, it will all be over. Jason checked his secure drive one final time, verifying that all evidence had been properly transferred to Justice Department servers. I keep thinking about my father. He died never knowing if his work would make a difference. He knew, Isabel said with quiet confidence. He encrypted those algorithms in ways only you would understand. He trusted you to finish what he started, even if he couldn't tell you directly. A distant rumble of thunder punctuated her words. The storm was approaching both literally and figuratively. Tomorrow would bring either justice or devastation. There was no middle ground when confronting an organization as powerful as Prometheus. Jason was about to respond when the lights flickered, then went dark. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, bathing the room in dim red lighting. That's not the storm, he said, instantly alert. The facility alarm began to wail, followed by Callahan's voice over the intercom. Security breach in sectors 3 and 5. All personnel to defensive positions. Protect the witnesses at all costs. The sound of distant gunfire confirmed their worst fears. Prometheus had found them again. They're making their move before the arrests can happen, Isabel realized. If they eliminate us and the evidence, they survive to fight another day, Jason finished grimly. He moved to the safe room door, checking that it was securely locked. This room is designed to withstand an assault. We should be safe until the situation is contained. The gunfire intensified, moving closer to their position. Through the reinforced walls, they could hear shouted commands and the heavy thud of tactical teams moving through the facility. What if they don't contain it? Isabel asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. What if Prometheus breaks through? Jason accessed the room's security panel, bringing up surveillance feeds from throughout the facility. Multiple screens showed chaotic scenes, armed men in tactical gear advancing methodically through the building, engaging FBI personnel in fierce firefights. They're well-trained and well-equipped, Jason observed. Military precision. Isabel peered at one of the screens. That's Viktor Kozlov, she said, pointing to a tall man directing the assault. Former Spetsnaz commander, now Prometheus's head of security. I saw his file in Khalil's documents. They sent their best, Jason said grimly. On another monitor, they watched as Kozlov's team breached the server room, planning explosive charges on the main databanks. The screens briefly flashed white as the explosions detonated, then returned to show the smoking ruins of the facility's central database. They're destroying the evidence, Isabel whispered. Not all of it, Jason reminded her, patting his secure drive. And the Justice Department already has copies of everything at multiple locations. The arrest will proceed regardless. The gunfire suddenly ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. On the monitors, they watched as Kozlov retrieved a satellite phone and spoke briefly. Moments later, a familiar figure appeared on the screen, striding confidently through the facility's main entrance. Senator Harrington. Isabel gasped. The distinguished senator looked nothing like his public persona as he surveyed the carnage around him. Gone was the grandfatherly statesman, replaced by a cold-eyed commander inspecting a battlefield. He came personally, Jason said in disbelief. Why would he risk exposure like that? Isabel's eyes widened in sudden understanding. Because he knows tomorrow is too late. He's not just here to destroy evidence. He's here to eliminate us as witnesses. On screen, Harrington gestured to a team of operatives carrying specialized equipment. They're heading this way, Jason realized. They must know where we are. What do we do now? Isabel asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Jason met her gaze, drawing strength from her courage. We prepared for this. Remember the dead man's switch? In 30 minutes, everything goes public no matter what happens to us. So we just need to stall them, Isabel concluded. Exactly, and hope the FBI can regroup fast enough. They watched on the monitors as Harrington's team methodically worked their way through the facility toward the safe room. Kozlov himself led the way, dispatching the few remaining FBI agents with cold efficiency. A heavy thud against their door made them both jump. Another followed, then another. Someone was trying to break through. Breach charges, Jason said, recognizing the methodical placement of explosives from his company's military training simulations. We have maybe 2 minutes. Isabel looked around the room desperately. There has to be another way out. There isn't. This room was designed to keep people safe, not to provide an escape route. The pounding stopped. On the surveillance feed, they watched as Kozlov himself placed the final charge on their door, then stepped back, speaking into a radio. Moments later, Senator Harrington appeared, inspecting the setup with clinical detachment before giving a curt nod. Jason, Isabel said quietly, taking his hands. Whatever happens next, I need you to know something. Meeting you, working with you, falling in love with you. It's been the most meaningful chapter of my life. Jason pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. When we make it through this, and we will, I'm going to ask you to marry me, Isabel Al-Nadim. She smiled up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. And I'm going to say yes, Jason Reed. The first explosion hit the door with concussive force, buckling the reinforced steel. The second followed immediately, creating a gap large enough for Kozlov to peer through. The third blast tore the door completely from its hinges, filling the room with smoke and debris. Through the haze, Senator Victor Harrington stepped into the safe room, flanked by armed mercenaries. In person, he looked older than his public appearances, his silver hair impeccably styled despite the violence around him. He surveyed Jason and Isabel with the cold curiosity of a scientist examining specimens. Mr. Reed, he said, his voice cultured and calm, you look remarkably like your father. He had that same defiant expression when we last spoke. Jason felt rage surging through him. Before you murdered him, before I authorized his removal, yes, Harrington corrected, as if discussing a minor policy decision. William Reed was brilliant, but he failed to understand the greater purpose of our work. You mean your theft of billions in taxpayer money? Isabel challenged. Harrington turned his attention to her. Miss Al-Nadim, your father was equally misguided. Tariq could have been part of our inner circle, benefiting from Prometheus's protection and prosperity. Instead, he chose a principled stand that benefited no one and cost him everything. It didn't cost him everything, Isabel replied fiercely. His principles live on through me. Admirable sentiment, Harrington said with a dismissive smile. But sentiments don't change the world. Power does. Prometheus has guided global technology development for decades, ensuring stability and American dominance. A few billion in redirected funds is a small price for maintaining that order. Jason laughed bitterly. Is that how you justify treason? Pretending your personal enrichment is somehow patriotic? You're as naive as your father. Harrington sighed. The world isn't shaped by idealists, Mr. Reed. It's shaped by realists willing to do what's necessary. Including murder, Jason stated flatly. Including whatever it takes, Harrington corrected. Now let's discuss the evidence you've compiled. We know you've transmitted copies to Justice Department servers, which my team has already neutralized. What we need to know is what other copies might exist. Jason and Isabel remained silent, standing shoulder to shoulder. Harrington nodded to Kozlov, who stepped forward menacingly. We have methods of extracting information that are quite effective. They can also be extremely unpleasant. The choice is yours. Those methods won't matter in about 40 minutes, Jason said calmly. Explain, Harrington demanded. Dead man's switch, Isabel answered, her voice steady. If Jason doesn't enter a cancellation code every hour, everything we've discovered about Prometheus automatically uploads to servers worldwide. News organizations, intelligence agencies, Interpol, all receive complete documentation of your crimes. Harrington's composed facade cracked slightly. You're bluffing. Check the laptop, Jason suggested. The countdown is right there on the screen. Kozlov moved to the computer, examining the display. 38 minutes, 17 seconds. He confirmed, his heavily accented voice betraying the first hints of concern. So you see, Senator, Jason continued, killing us doesn't solve your problem. It actually guarantees your exposure. Harrington's eyes narrowed as he calculated options. What do you want? Justice, Jason said simply. You face trial for my father's murder and all your other crimes. In return, I deactivate the dead man's switch. Absurd, Harrington scoffed. I can simply force you to deactivate it, then eliminate you both. The deactivation requires biometric confirmation from both of us, plus a 20-character passcode that only I know, Isabel countered. Under duress, I'll enter the wrong code, which triggers immediate release of all files. It was a bluff, but a convincing one. Jason kept his expression neutral, impressed by Isabel's quick thinking. Harrington paced the small room, his mind visibly racing. Perhaps a compromise. You deactivate your fail-safe, and I ensure you both receive new identities, new lives far from here. We've tried witness protection, Isabel said dryly. It didn't take. This would be different, Harrington insisted. Prometheus resources far exceed government programs. You would disappear completely wealthy beyond imagination, free to live however you choose. Except we'd never be free, Jason said. We'd always be looking over our shoulders, waiting for you to decide we're too great a liability. Just like our fathers, Isabel added. A sudden commotion outside the room drew Kozlov's attention. He listened to his earpiece, then whispered urgently to Harrington, whose face darkened with anger. FBI tactical teams have breached the perimeter. Harrington announced, his composure finally cracking. It seems our time is limited. So is your freedom, Jason observed. Surrounding a federal facility, murdering federal agents. That alone would end your career and your liberty. But combined with everything else we've uncovered, you'll spend the rest of your life in a supermax prison, Isabel finished. Harrington's aristocratic features contorted with rage. My freedom is not negotiable, he snarled, drawing a pistol from inside his jacket. If Prometheus falls, I have contingencies. Offshore accounts, prepared identities, extraction protocols. But first, I'll ensure you don't live to test him. The gun leveled at Jason's chest. Your father died slowly, painfully, believing his work had been for nothing. You'll have the small mercy of a quicker end. As his finger tightened on the trigger, a deafening explosion rocked the facility. The ceiling above them partially collapsed, sending Harrington and his mercenaries staggering. In the chaos, Jason lunged forward, tackling the senator and sending the gun skittering across the floor. Kozlov recovered quickly, drawing his own weapon, but Isabel was faster. She grabbed a metal chair and swung it with all her strength, catching the Russian across the face. He stumbled backward, blood streaming from his nose. Jason and Harrington grappled on the floor, the senator's age belied by surprising strength. "You're just like your father," Harrington spat, "too principled to do what's necessary." "My father taught me principles are exactly what's necessary," Jason countered, finally pinning the older man, "especially when facing men like you." The room filled with smoke and shouts as FBI tactical teams breached the remaining defenses. Agent Callahan led the charge, her service weapon trained on Kozlov, who had recovered his balance and was reaching for his fallen gun. "Federal agents freeze," she commanded. The Russian mercenary hesitated for only a moment before making his decision. He dove for his weapon, coming up firing. FBI agents returned fire immediately, their bullets striking with precision. Kozlov collapsed, his lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. Harrington, seeing his last protection eliminated, went limp beneath Jason's grip. The fight drained from him, replaced by the calculating look of a man already planning his legal defense. "Senator Victor Harrington," Callahan announced formally, holstering her weapon and producing handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, treason, fraud, and the murders of William Reed, Tariq al-Nadim, and numerous others." As Harrington was led away, his once commanding presence diminished by defeat, Jason and Isabel stood in the wreckage of the safe room, holding each other tightly. "It's over," Callahan confirmed, returning to them. "Prometheus operations are being raided worldwide as we speak. 43 arrests so far, with more coming hourly." "The evidence?" Jason asked urgently. "Secure." Harrington's team damaged some servers, but the Justice Department had already created redundant copies at multiple locations. "Your father's algorithms proved their worth today. They'll be studying them for years." Isabel sagged against Jason in relief. "So we won." "You did more than win," Callahan said with genuine respect. "You changed history. Defense contracting will never be the same after these revelations." The weeks that followed saw a flurry of activity as Prometheus's vast criminal enterprise unraveled. Jason and Isabel testified before congressional committees, grand juries, and international tribunals, methodically explaining the elaborate fraud network their fathers had died trying to expose. Senator Harrington and his co-conspirators faced a staggering array of charges, from fraud and money laundering to espionage and murder. The evidence was overwhelming, built on the foundation William Reed and Tariq al-Nadim had started years before. 3 months after the raid on the FBI facility, Jason stood in the Manhattan offices of Reed Technologies, looking out over the city skyline. The company had tripled in value since the Prometheus revelations, with government agencies worldwide clamoring for his father's fraud detection algorithms. "Quite a view," Isabel said, joining him at the window. She had just returned from Switzerland, where she'd finally reclaimed her family's shipping empire after years in hiding. "How does it feel to be Isabel al-Nadim again?" Jason asked, taking her hand. "Surreal," she admitted. The banking officials were falling over themselves to help the long-lost heiress who helped bring down an international conspiracy. "But it's the shipping captains I really enjoyed meeting. They all had stories about my father, his integrity, his fairness, his vision." "Legacy matters," Jason said softly. "Not the money or the patents, but the principles behind them." Isabel nodded, her eyes reflecting the afternoon sunlight. "I've been thinking about what we discussed in the safe house, about combining our resources to build something new." "The Reed al-Nadim Foundation," Jason recalled. "I've had my attorneys draft incorporation papers," Isabel said, pulling a folder from her briefcase. $400 million from the al-Nadim Trust, combined with whatever Reed Technologies can contribute." Jason smiled. "As it happens, our IPO closed yesterday. My stake is currently valued at just over $390 million. Isabel laughed. "So we're almost equals then." "I was always punching above my weight with you," Jason said, pulling her close. "The foundation charter focuses on transparency technology for global commerce," Isabel explained, opening the folder. "Just as we discussed, starting with defense contracting, then expanding to global supply chains, financial systems, and eventually governmental procurement worldwide. Making corruption harder everywhere," Jason murmured, reviewing the documents. "It's perfect. It's exactly what our fathers would have wanted." 6 months later, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements. The inaugural gala of the Reed al-Nadim Foundation for Global Transparency had drawn leaders from business, government, and civil society worldwide. Jason Reed stood at the podium, surveying the distinguished crowd with quiet pride. In the front row, Isabel sat beside Agent Callahan, now promoted to assistant director, Following the Prometheus investigation, Isabel wore a navy blue gown that matched her eyes, looking every inch the sophisticated philanthropist she'd become. The Foundation's mission is simple, Jason explained to the rapt audience. We provide technology, education, and resources to combat corruption in global commerce through legitimate partnerships that respect intellectual property and foster genuine economic growth. We believe that innovation should lift everyone up, not tear anyone down. The applause was enthusiastic, but Jason only had eyes for Isabel. Over the past 6 months, they'd worked tirelessly to combine Reed Technologies and Al Nadim Shipping into forces for positive change. Reed Technologies now focused on transparency algorithms for government contracting, while the Al Nadim fleet specialized in humanitarian aid transport and ethical supply chain management. None of this would have been possible. Jason continued, his voice growing warmer. Without the woman who taught me that true strength isn't about building walls around your success. It's about using your success to build bridges for others. Isabel's cheeks flushed as attention turned to her. She'd never fully adjusted to public recognition after years in hiding. Isabel Al-Nadim Beso. Jason said, former attorney, whistleblower heiress, and the woman who saved not just my company, but my understanding of what it means to be truly successful. The applause grew louder as Isabel smiled, the brilliant, unguarded smile that Jason had fallen in love with during their first conversation about fraudulent contracts. Isabel, Jason said, his carefully prepared speech forgotten as he looked at the woman who changed his life. Would you join me up here? Isabel's eyes widened in surprise, but she rose gracefully and made her way to the podium. When she reached Jason, he took her hands in his. 6 months ago, he said, speaking now to Isabel rather than the audience, I thought I knew what I wanted from life. Success, wealth, recognition, all the things that look impressive on paper. Isabel's eyes sparkled with unshed tears as she realized what was happening. But you taught me that real success isn't about what you achieve. It's about who you become in the process of achieving it. You made me a better man, a better leader, and a better human being. Jason released one of her hands to reach into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Isabel Al-Nadim, he said, dropping to one knee as gasps and applause filled the ballroom. You saved my company, exposed international criminals, and sacrificed everything for justice. But most importantly, you showed me what it means to love someone completely and without reservation. Isabel's tears spilled over as Jason opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald engagement ring surrounded by diamonds. Will you marry me? Jason asked, his voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. Will you build this crazy, beautiful, complicated life with me? Isabel looked down at the man who'd stood by her through federal investigations, death threats, and the revelation of her hidden fortune. The man who'd never once made her feel like her money was more important than her heart. Jason Reed, she said, her voice shaking with emotion and joy. You are the most stubborn, brilliant, protective man I've ever met. You challenged me to be brave when I wanted to hide, and you loved me when I couldn't love myself. The audience held its breath as Isabel paused, her smile growing radiant. Yes, she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll build this beautiful life with you. And yes, I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that the smartest thing you ever did was trust a server who spoke too many languages for her own good. The ballroom erupted in applause as Jason slipped the ring onto Isabel's finger and stood to kiss her properly. As their lips met, Isabel whispered against his mouth, you realize this means you're stuck with me and my $400 million, right? Jason laughed, pulling her closer. Isabel Al-Nadim Reed has a nice ring to it. And just think of all the good we can do with $800 million in 2 companies. $800 million, Isabel asked in surprise. Reed Technologies' IPO went through this morning, Jason said with a grin. Apparently successfully fighting international corporate espionage is very good for business. Isabel's laugh was pure joy as she kissed him again, not caring that 800 people were watching. Later, as they danced to their first song as an engaged couple, Isabel looked up at Jason with the mischievous expression that never failed to make his heart race. You know, she said softly, there's something else I should probably tell you before we get married. Jason's eyebrows rose in mock alarm. Please tell me you're not secretly related to any other international crime families. Nothing that dramatic, Isabel assured him, then paused with perfect comedic timing. I just thought you should know that I also speak Italian, Portuguese, and Russian. That makes 9 languages total, not 6. Jason stopped dancing and stared at her. 9 languages. I may have undersold myself slightly when we first met. Jason threw back his head and laughed, spinning Isabel around the dance floor. Isabel Al-Nadim, you are going to keep me surprised for the rest of my life, aren't you? Count on it, Mr. Reed, she smiled. Count on it. As they danced beneath crystal chandeliers surrounded by friends and allies who had watched them fight for justice against impossible odds, Jason realized that his father's legacy had become something far greater than either of them could have imagined. What began as William Reed's solitary quest for truth had transformed into a global movement for transparency led by his son and the daughter of his long-ago ally. And somewhere Jason believed William Reed and Tariq al-Nadim Maying were looking down with pride, knowing their children had not only avenged their deaths, but had built something magnificent from the foundation they'd laid together. 6 months after the gala, the Reed al-Nadim Foundation had opened technology centers in 12 countries. Senator Harrington and his Prometheus associates were serving life sentences in federal prison, and Isabel had indeed added 3 more languages to her repertoire. She claimed it was for business purposes, but Jason suspected she just enjoyed watching his expression when she casually translated yet another conversation he thought was private. Their wedding was held at the Manhattan courthouse, where Isabel had testified against Prometheus, with Agent Callahan as maid of honor and the Deputy Attorney General officiating. Isabel wore her grandmother's pearls and carried jasmine flowers. Jason wore his father's cufflinks and his Rolex watch, the timepiece that had once been a mysterious inheritance, now a symbol of justice fulfilled. They honeymooned in Switzerland, where Isabel formally donated half of her inheritance to international transparency programs. When reporters asked why, she simply said, "Because knowledge should never be hoarded, it should be shared." On their last day in Geneva, they visited the small cemetery where Tariq al-Nadim had been laid to rest. Isabel placed white roses on her father's grave, then stood in silence, her hand tightly clasping Jason's. "He would have loved you," she said finally, "almost as much as I do." Jason squeezed her hand, thinking of his own father and the legacy that had brought them together. "They gave us the tools," he said quietly, "but we built something they never could." "The Reed al-Nadim legacy," Isabel agreed, "just beginning." As they walked away from the cemetery hand in hand, Jason felt the weight of his father's watch on his wrist, a comforting presence rather than a burden. The truth had waited for the right moment, just as William Reed had inscribed all those years ago. And now that truth had set them free to build a future neither of their fathers could have imagined, but both would have cherished. The Reed al-Nadim legacy had only just begun.